I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you to this opening salvo, radical but practical ideas to advance knowledge work. Now, one of the reasons why I love the Drucker Forum is that it's an extraordinary opportunity where you have some of the world's leading academics. I mean, it's extraordinary the number of Thinkers 50 who are actually in this room today. And we bring those people together with some of the most interesting and insightful business leaders, social entrepreneurs, and government officials. So you have academics interested in practice and practitioners interested in ideas and insights. And the conversations can sometimes be magical. So in this opening session, we're going to try to give you a taster for a little bit of that magic. We're going to hear from two of the Thinkers 50 who are going to share some food for thought, some ideas, some provocations to stimulate and engage and inspire us. And then we have 4 CEOs and senior executives who are going to join in the conversation and share their reactions and their perspectives and their provocations. So hopefully this will give you a bit of inspiration for action, to use Richard's phrase. Now, we are going to be quite broad. We're going to aim to give you a taster for many different topics. But rest assured, during the rest of the 2 days, you will have many opportunities to go deeper into AI and what that means, into innovation and creativity and entrepreneurialism, into leadership and learning. So this is just the taster to get us going. Now, the way we're going to do this is to first of all hear from 2 of the Thinkers 50. So we're going to have Gianpiero and Amy kick us off with short presentations. Think of it like a mini TED Talk to give us some food for thought, some ideas and some insights from their work. And then after those 2 short presentations, we're then going to broaden it open to a much bigger conversation. So our first speaker is Gianpiero Petriglieri, who is a doctor and a psychiatrist by training, and also an associate professor in organizational behavior at INSEAD. A truly remarkable person who's done some amazing research around leadership and learning. So please join me in welcoming Gianpiero.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mary. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. I mean, look at this. Amazing, huh? You would think it's the golden age of knowledge work. What a better place, take it in, than a former imperial palace to think about the fate of knowledge work. And it's really suited because I actually want to make the point that knowledge work, or more precisely, a certain kind of knowledge work, the way we've understood and practiced it over the last 50 years, is going the way of the Habsburg, or the Bourbons, or the Savoy, if you want. To put it bluntly, it's dead. And no, it's not AI that killed it. It's actually been ill for a long time. But don't worry, it's not going to be all doom and gloom. At the end, I want to argue that this might be good news. But let me start with a little story, since we're here. How many of you here in the room have teenage children? Great. I have 2. I'm sure you'll agree with me. It is, how shall we put it, a humbling experience. But it does have its moments of genuine bliss. Like, for example, the opportunity to witness your children discover the world of work. And I had one such opportunity in a place similar to this a few months ago. My son, Pietro, is 16, and he's an aspiring historian. And he had the good fortune of landing an internship at the Château de Versailles in the conservation department. And I had the good fortune of being able to rent a studio and decamp with him there for a couple of weeks. So for this time, during the day, I did my knowledge work from home, and he went off to the palace to do his, and then we would meet in the evening and for a walk and for dinner. And on one of these evenings, we were walking on one of the courtyards in front of the chateau, and man, this boy was so alive. And I thought I'd ask him a question that I love asking people when I visit their workplace. What do you see? What do you see that I cannot see because I'm a visitor, but it's obvious to you because you work here? And he thought about it for a second and he said, people lived here. And then he paused and said, and they still do. People still live here. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, you see, when you're a visitor, it's easy to see this massive enterprise that needs to be secured, that needs to be operated, that needs to be maintained, that costs the government a lot of money, or to see this impressive monument, the symbol of a powerful culture of the past. And he showed me his badge, and it does say Musée de Versailles, and he told me, but that's not what we call it. We call it la maison. It's a home. People lived here. Certain people lived here. Kings and queens and courtesans and maids. And it meant something to live in this place. And it did something to them and to their relationships with each other and with the people outside. And now there's lots of visitors, but some people still live here. The scholars, the professionals, the curators. And it means something to work here. It makes you part of something, to work in this place, for this place, every day. And I was so moved by that idea. And I thought, I didn't say this, because I know better than to say that kind of thing to your teenage son, but I did think it. I have spent 20 years looking at organizations exactly that way and wondering, why is it so difficult to notice that people live here? Why do we forget? When we look at organizations, often we look at a really complex machine that needs to be run smoothly. Or sometimes we look at them as a kind of monument, the manifestation of the vision, of the values of a founder, of an executive team. And once you look at them that way, then it's easy to ask instrumental questions. Things like, are they efficient? Are they consistent? Are they productive? Do people feel proud? But once you look at them as a maison, as a home, then you start asking yourself a different set of questions, humanistic questions. Is it safe? Is it hospitable? Who lives here? How do they live? Do they feel close? Do they feel free? And you see, if you look at the organizations where knowledge workers live these days, instrumentally they are doing great. Efficient, most, consistent, many, productive, oh yeah, proud too. But if you look at them humanistically, then the picture is a little bit less bright. Safe, for some more than others. Hospitable, it depends. There's a lot more visitors than residents at most offices on any given day these days. Work is ever more precarious. And then there's the rise of what I call the workplace sorrow in 3Ds. People are distressed, distracted, disconnected. The truth is, leaders of knowledge organizations of the past 50 years have been a lot better at building monumental machines than they have been at building human-friendly maisons. Just like the leaders who built this. And you and I, my friends, have not just lived through the golden age of knowledge work. We've lived in the golden cage of knowledge work. And I think one of the problems is the way we've understood and practiced knowledge work and management and leadership and all such concepts that lump together. And we've done it in a way that systematically favors the mechanical, the instrumental, over the organic, the humanistic, that lets the latter be subordinate, be exploited by the former. We are much more likely to be concerned about efficiency, about productivity, about things like that than we are about vitality, about inclusion, about freedom. And you see, that's why I say that knowledge work is dead. Because now we realize that, even when we share those humanistic, even when we address those humanistic concerns, we often do it through an instrumental lens. Let's keep people more comfortable. Let's make our culture more congenial so that we can all be more productive. That is humanism of convenience. That is humanism light. And of course, machines now are going to be able to do all that work of crunching data, running processes, appeasing people much better, faster, cheaper than any of us can. And I think many of us worry about being replaced by machines because knowledge work has been mechanical all along. And we've been doing the work of machines inside bigger machines, and the realization is a shock. But it might be a helpful shock because it's forcing us to ask the questions, what work could we be doing instead? What is the work? And I think the work is bringing work and workplaces to life, starting by the realization that people live here. And one of the key findings in my research is that some people still live well in organizations that serve as a kind of home. People are attracted to those organizations. People are engaged in those organizations. Sometimes people remain committed to those organizations even long after they have left. And what do the leaders of those organizations do? They are homemakers. They constantly try to balance instrumental and humanistic imperatives. Yes, they do worry about getting stuff done efficiently and productively, but they also care about helping people grow freely. Now, they may not promise loyalty, but they do promise learning. And more recently, I've been looking at what does it take to keep the promise of learning. And if you're interested in the details, I encourage you to look out for the January issue of the Harvard Business Review. There's a whole article in there, but here's the upshot. Most leaders favor instrumental learning, the kind of learning that makes you indeed more productive in your organization, and that works really well when people need more alignment. Now, some leaders favor humanistic learning, the kind of learning that makes you more conscious of who you are, more courageous to do something different, which is great when people need to be empowered to innovate. You see, because instrumental learning helps us fit. It makes us converge to a norm. And humanistic learning sets us free. It helps us diverge from a norm. But then there are a few leaders who try to balance the two, which is the hardest thing. And it really works well if your primary purpose is inclusion. And these are leaders who are very serious about the idea of building communities as much as machines. And you can't have a community unless people feel that they can belong without losing themselves. And I think what these findings do is they help us think about why is it that our organizations are more and more efficient but still struggle mightily with innovation and with inclusion? Well, because we have let the humanistic be subordinated to the instrumental in leadership and learning far too long. And we're getting the realization that actually the problem is no longer the productivity of knowledge. The problem is the purpose of learning. And if we want to make that shift, we need to change the way we lead. And if we want to change the way we lead, we need to change the way we learn. So, there's my idea. People live here. We live here in this knowledge economy. And with or without AI, it will not be a good home if it only makes us more productive and proud. To be a good home, it also has to help us be closer to each other and sets us free at the same time. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you so much, Gianpiero, for kicking us off. Now, as I mentioned, we want to touch on a range of different topics, get lots of food for thought, and then we're going to invite our senior executives to join in the conversation. So our next speaker is someone who really doesn't need an introduction. Amy Edmondson, as you all know, is a professor at Harvard Business School. She's been on the Thinkers 50 list for as long as I've ever looked at the Thinkers 50 list, and this year has been recognized as #1, the most influential thinker, researcher, writer on management and leadership topics today. So we're absolutely thrilled to have Amy, and as you know, she's done work on lots of different areas, from teams and teaming to innovation and creativity to psychological safety. And of course, her latest book, The Right Kind of Wrong: How Organizations Need to Think Differently About Failure and Risk. And so please join me in welcoming for our second short TED Talk, Amy Edmondson.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, so my no longer teenage son said, it must have been a tough year for thinking. Just saying, okay. And he's got a point there. So I want to talk about two potentially radical and potentially practical ideas for the future of knowledge work. And both, in fact, are particularly related to innovation. And so the first one is essentially that we must fail more often. And the second one is that we must engage together in a collaborative design process that will be integrative, iterative, and necessarily imperfect about how work will work in the future, knowledge work in particular. So let me take these one at a time. So the failure bit, and as Mary said, I did write a book recently, Right Kind of Wrong: The Science of Failing Well. And the underappreciated part of the science of failing well is that doesn't mean just fail a lot, fail often, fail early, the Silicon Valley happy talk. It means absolutely be willing to take smart risks and absolutely do your part as managers, as colleagues, to prevent stupid failures. Right, to prevent what I'll call preventable failures. And I find that people have equal difficulty with both, and that both, by the way, tie back to psychological safety, which is not about feeling comfortable. Right? It is about a willingness to take risks, primarily interpersonal risks. The interpersonal risks of speaking up, with a maybe crazy idea, with a need for help, with a dissenting view. Right? Those are the things that most of us ordinary human beings find difficult to do at work, especially when there's a hierarchy present and when isn't there. And so psychological safety describes an environment, and that's what this conference is indeed, where people believe not that those risks are easy, but that they're welcome. And that includes taking the kinds of smart risks, say in a laboratory, that might not turn out the way you dearly hope they will. So taking smart risks is, of course, the ordinary work of scientific laboratories, of R&D departments. And it must start to become more the ordinary work of all of us. Right? That willingness to try something that might take us a step further toward an important goal for our team or our organization or sometimes ourselves, but also might backfire. Now, obvious ones are some innovation project, say a pilot that fails either technologically or to engage customer interest. You tried, you had good reason to believe it might work, and yet it's a failure. We must learn to welcome and celebrate those disappointments. On a much lower scale, that willingness to speak up in a meeting with a bold idea, take a risk that in fact ends up falling flat or is not well received, that's got to be okay also. So we need to take more risks, and we need to, in that realm, be quite willing to do our part, including speaking up when you see something wrong, see that someone's about to make a preventable error, particularly when there's high stakes, whether human safety, financial or reputational stakes at hand, to be willing to take those risks as well. Now, I'll give you, just to make it more concrete, I'll give you a couple of examples of what I call intelligent failures. Intelligent failures are the still undesired result of a thoughtful foray in new territory. You could not have known in advance that it wouldn't work. And an intelligent failure occurs when you arguably are in new territory. There is no way to look up the answer, to get the recipe on the internet. It's in pursuit of a goal. You've done your homework, right? You have good reason to believe that what you're about to try might work. And finally, the failure will be small, no bigger than necessary to get the new knowledge. That's basically the criteria. It's also, I think this goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, important to learn from them. You know, you get the failure, that's your investment, now get your money's worth and do the learning. So a couple of simple examples. I already mentioned a pilot project done, say, in a tech company that fails to engage customers or fails to function the way it's supposed to. Again, smart failure, new territory. But what about in your lives? What about a blind date? Right? You have a goal to find, say, a life partner. You have a good reason to believe this might be a viable partner for you. Maybe it's a friend of a friend. Maybe an app told you, whatever. And you meet for coffee, right? Again, as small as possible. And it doesn't work out. Intelligent failure, right? We have to celebrate those and not bemoan, you know, what did I do wrong to even say yes? Nothing. You did nothing wrong to say yes. But what about the not-so-intelligent failures? I divide them into two categories, basic and complex. Basic means it has a single cause. It means it could be human error, it could be something outside your control, but a single, simple cause led to an undesired result in familiar territory. Let me give you an example. In August of 2021, a Citibank employee essentially checked the wrong box, not fully paying attention on an online form, and accidentally transferred $900 million to a group of lenders. Wait, it gets worse. A controversial finders keepers ruling in the courts disallowed Citibank from getting the funds back. So basic, by the way, one of the ways we advocate preventing basic failure is through failure proofing, right? Through not designing a system that is so very easy to get wrong. But that would be a basic failure, and that would be, just to be clear, that's an example of the kind of failure I think we should work hard to prevent. Complex failures are multi-causal. They are the kinds of breakdowns that happen when not one, but a handful of factors, maybe a handful of small deviations from very best practice, come together in just the wrong way to produce a failure. Again, in often familiar, but sometimes unfamiliar territory. These are the failures I've studied the most often, and these are the failures that are most readily prevented by speaking up. Nearly all of the complex failures, whether it's NASA's shuttle tragedies or far smaller things at the bedside in a tertiary care hospital, could have been prevented had someone been willing to speak up in a timely way. So, big fan of preventing those, and great managers in knowledge work especially are able to help their teams prevent them. And importantly, for the creation of new value, for innovation, we must help people take smart risks. We do that by nurturing curiosity, by celebrating the knowledge, the learning that is available when we get it wrong in new territory, and many other things we could talk more about. Now, just very briefly, I think Gianpiero's remarks really inspire me to think about essentially two scarce resources for the knowledge worker. And one is attention, right? Our ability to really focus and really solve problems and really just get into the substance, and almost everything else goes by the wayside for a little while. That's such a joyful experience at times, and I think increasingly we are without that experience. The other scarce resource is connection, right? And connectedness to each other. And when you think about it, the knowledge worker is in the sweet spot when they feel deeply connected to their colleagues, when they are living. That's where living exists, is when we're focusing and connecting. That's living. I could describe the other 4 quadrants, but I won't for now. But what I will say is that with Mark Mortensen, one of Gianpiero's colleagues at INSEAD, we have been looking into, and here, this is my next book, so it's a little less, right at the top of my head here, but we've been looking into the return to office and other aspects of the future of work very deeply. And I will just start by saying this is an empirical question, and so I will not give you all the answers, but I will give you where we are. And I'll say one simple thing now that is both perhaps radical and certainly practical, which is that we must stop having this conversation framed as a battle. If you look at all of the articles in places like Harvard Business Review, it is far too often us versus them, companies versus employees, managers, versus employees. It's a battle, it's a war. One side wants one thing, the other side wants the other. No, it just doesn't work that way. We have a natural tendency to privilege the me and the now over the us and the later. And good management is about overriding that so that we can deeply care about later and about us and build sustainable communities of people who are living and growing and learning together. Mark and I propose that this is a journey that will have to be collaborative, that will have to be a design journey, a design based on what do our customers need, what does the world need, what do societies need, and how will we produce it together. That becomes a very complex problem, but a tractable one. How much of that can we do at a distance? What can we do at a distance? What can we not do at a distance? Can we design accordingly? These are issues I can't wait to dig into more fully, but I just wanted to get us started and say these are empirical questions, and these are team problem-solving opportunities, and I'm just thrilled to be a part of it. Thank you.
Please stay up.
Stay.
Thank you so much, Amy. As always, you've given us lots of amazing food for thought. So now what we're going to do is we're going to invite Gianpiero back, and we're going to invite 4 CEOs and senior executives to join in a conversation around these topics and indeed other radical but practical ideas for advancing knowledge work. So please join me in welcoming Alex Adamopoulos, who is the founder and CEO of Emergn, a digital services business that is truly global. Alex, please join us. Maybe we'll hold the applause for the end once I get all of our guest speakers on, because I'm conscious of time. Pierre, Manh, who is the CEO of PMI, Project Management Institute. Oh, well, we can applaud everyone, no worries. Liz Kane, the Vice President of HR EMEA for Palo Alto Networks. And last but by no means least, Liesje Meijknecht, who is a partner at McKinsey's Amsterdam office, where she leads work on organization and people, especially with high-tech companies. So welcome to all of you. Now, unfortunately, we have some huge topics, and we won't be able to do justice to all of them in this next conversation, but you will have opportunities to connect over coffee breaks and in all the other sessions. But let me kick us off, actually, Gianpiero, with some of the remarks that you made. Now, as it happens, we have leaders of a broad range of knowledge organizations who are up here on the panel with us, and I'd love to get their reactions to the fact that knowledge work, it may be going away. Is knowledge work dead? Right? We asked you to provoke us, and you did. Thank you. So, Alex, let me start with you, because Emergn is truly a knowledge organization. What are your reactions as you look at what's happening in the world today?
I think from a practical level, I have several views on this. I don't think knowledge work is dead. I actually think knowledge work is still very important to our society and to the people that show up at work every day. Part of my concern is where we're going with the topic of technology, though, as it relates to knowledge work. There's a significant amount of what I call AI fear-mongering going on in the market. And part of that problem is because we're making much of a topic that we still don't fully understand. And this really stems from an enormous lack of know-how and practical knowledge in the business world right now around things like AI. It's an overused term. And one of the challenges that we see in our work is that many managers and leaders of large global enterprises are still lacking a common vocabulary. They're still lacking a common set of definition of terms when it comes to many things in their business, but certainly the topic of AI.
Yep. You mentioned recently some work that you had done or some research around Fortune 500 senior executives. I'd love for you to share a little bit of those insights.
Yeah, and I think I can share some examples of our work, but then I want to share a common denominator to kind of point back to why I don't think knowledge work is dead. So if I think of some examples would include one of the world's largest software companies. They're actually a household name. They're actually looking at how do we keep knowledge work alive by the creation of a tool that allows facial recognition inside classrooms or learning environments, so they can actually capture the emotive responses of the participants in the classroom. Why? Because they want to know if they're engaged with the content, if they're engaged with the learning, so they can make improvements to the whole process of learning in their environment. As opposed to not bringing people into environments like that, they're actually using very advanced machine learning tools to actually do that.
To enhance and improve the experience.
To enhance it. Another example are trucking companies that are actually installing micro cameras. Right? I love this one because both the trucking company and the insurance company insuring them need to be able to monitor driver behavior, driver performance. Why? So they can enhance lives. They can enhance safety. That's also very important. There are other examples that I would use. Predictive analytics for the shop floor. You know, if you're one of the world's largest manufacturers of a particular type of product, and you have big machinery, and you have people walking around the floor to check if the equipment's going to work, that's an old process, right? So there's some great examples now of use cases where you have these predictive maintenance tools, again, using machine learning to actually identify when that machine needs help and maintenance, right? It doesn't omit the person from checking on it, but it does actually provide more analysis and more insight as to what's included. Even another one that I've seen recently with our work, believe it or not, is the court system, right? Around entity recognition, legal entity recognition, being able to reduce processing times by 90% in terms of looking at the data involved in this thing. So most of you will have examples in your businesses or are using these technologies in similar ways, and you're seeing the improvements. But the one thing that they all have in common is still people. Right? There's still people involved that have to vet and validate the work. There's still people who have the expertise and the knowledge as a knowledge worker and the subject matter expertise of that environment that are needed to validate the work.
Fantastic. And I'm going to come back and ask you, how do we help people? Because the technology sometimes goes faster. But before I do, let me turn to Liz. Palo Alto Networks, again, knowledge economy, absolutely at the heart. How are you thinking about all these disruptions?
So, I mean, first of all, it's a balance, isn't it? I mean, we are very much a people-centric business. You know, we're about knowledge, creativity, innovation. And I think how we think about AI is it's an evolution, isn't it? I mean, if you think about how we use the internet and now how we use iPhones, things become gradually pervasive in our way of work. And I think that's the same for AI. I mean, I think Ernest Hemingway said, you go bankrupt slowly and then suddenly. And I think that's what will happen with AI. But AI is certainly not new to Palo Alto. We're a cybersecurity company. Our mission is to protect everybody's digital way of life. So we've been using machine learning, deep thinking, AI for a period of time to do what we use with our generation AI, which is predictive AI now. So, if you think about how everybody is racing to use AI, that's a scary thing because it's not just us racing to use AI, it's cyber criminals. We see I think the figure is, and it blows your mind, 1.6 million unique attacks every day. So that's things that we've never seen before. So we're protecting 8 billion attacks every day. So, that's the way that we look at it from our product organization. We're constantly learning, and we need to keep constantly learning. But then when you get into the workforce, it becomes quite different. We don't want to race to look at how we use AI with jobs. We want to be very thoughtful. I mean, one of the things that we've done recently as an HR function is we're using what we're calling Panda, which gets everyone's, why do you call it Panda? So it's the Palo Alto Network's digital assistant. So as an HR team, employees can go in and ask questions of our AI, and we're learning all the time, but it's reducing some of the transactional work that the team is doing because it's moving the human work up the value chain because we've got to learn faster. The data-driven piece is really important, but you can't forget the human aspect,
the human
as well.
judgment and insight. It's some great examples from both of you, and maybe let me turn to Pierre. I'd love to hear how you're thinking about this at PMI.
I think there's a tendency to, in fact, downplay a little bit the consequences of AI. And it's a normal reaction to fear of losing what is, we think, distinctive for human beings. So we tend to say, well, AI is going to automate the rote tasks. It's a little bit like mechanization of agriculture, manufacturing in the past, and so it's great because we'll be focused on distinctive aspects of humanity, like empathy, like things, creativity, innovation, things like that. But in reality, at least with Gen AI, we're all seeing that, well, actually, it is quite creative. It is quite empathetic. It mimics empathy very well, at least, which, many human beings do as well. And if you think about how frictionless the interaction with AI will become going forward, voice, memory of past conversations, so you don't have to rehash things again and again when you talk to AI. Young people are polite with AI. They say, thank you, please, because they want Gen AI to like them. So if you think of 10, 20, 30 years down the road, AI is going to be extremely human, an extension of ourselves, and definitely of knowledge, right? A lot of knowledge will be, in fact, in AI and almost seamlessly interacting with us. So that is very scary for humans. It's not the first time it happens. We had, in the past, other moments of discoveries like Copernic, showing us that humans are not the center of the universe.
Absolutely, and it's
very
interesting
scary.
Drucker even wrote about this massive transformation.
Yeah, Darwin, that we actually come from primates. We're not just a creation that is unique. Freud, that we don't control every of our actions. They're driven by unconsciousness. So we have to, and we overcame all of that, but now it's coming again with AI. So what is distinctively human? That's what I think we need to think about as leaders, as managers, to focus on that and prepare our teams for that. And I think there's a triptych, in my opinion. First one is accountability. I don't think this is going away. Whether you're a CEO, a doctor, a surgeon, a journalist, the way you use AI, how much you use it, whether you even use it, is your decision. In the end, you are accountable. Accountability is your commitment to others. That, I think, is not going to go away. But with this, accountability is great, but if you have a surgeon, you're happy that he's committed or she's committed to succeed when they operate on you, but you want them to actually succeed. So with this comes ownership. Ownership is basically a reflection of who you are and what you stand for so that you can up your game and be really good at what you're doing. It's all about the purpose you find in your work. And with this accountability and ownership comes choice. You can't put so much pressure on humans that they only have to be accountable and own. They have to have some choice. Choice is basically letting them decide how they think they can best contribute. And that triptych of accountability, ownership, and choice, I believe, is what will stay distinctively human and what us as leaders, as managers, we need to nurture and focus on.
Yeah, I love that question. You know, what is distinctively human? And you're right, we've seen massive transformations over time. So Drucker wrote about the Industrial Revolution and how machines replaced manual labor, human labor, our muscles from the neck down. And now we're going through a technological revolution where machines, as you said, they can not only calculate, but they can craft, they can create. And so they can do some of the things that humans used to do, muscles from the neck up. And so it really comes back to that question, what is distinctively human, and how do we use all of this technology to enhance and to augment in a smart way, right? And that's a huge topic I'm sure we'll cover over the next 2 days. Liesje, let me bring you in. So you're with McKinsey. I know you've done a huge amount of research. Tell us about some of the data, some of the research that you've done on AI.
Yes, thank you, Mary, and very happy to be here indeed. So we are also obviously in the field of knowledge, but I would also say we're in the field of innovation and insight, right? Because knowledge sometimes has this portion of being stable or a bit static. And I think now we're talking about, okay, how do we then interact with AI or machines or ourselves or others in the terms of like building something next? And I think in our research, we saw a couple of things, but maybe just a couple of facts to point out that kept me, well, I would not say awake at night, but like a bit on the tip of the chair. If you look at AI, and we all know this is a exponential movement, right? Like it's growing and it's growing rapid, which is in itself, I would always say growth tends to be a good thing. But in 2000, the EU published a white paper on AI, just to see what is out there, how should we deal with it. It mentioned the word risk 95 times. It also mentioned the word opportunity 2 times. That was 2000, and then we had exponential growth, and we have now AI all in our iPhones in our pocket. We have it read bedtime stories to our kids, right? So we get a bit more used to it. So now there is the actual act on AI that was published this year by the European Union again. So I looked again, and it's still 2 times opportunity, and it's 776 times the word risk. So that went up exponentially, right? But at the end of the day, it will be both, right? So, and I think very much on what was said now, how do we interact with it? What do we choose to do? But let's also not diminish the part on like what it can actually bring in a thoughtful way. And I think where it's sometimes scary, it is where we were used to like mechanical or industrial evolution. It never touched on knowledge work. It never touched on education. It never touched on our creative jobs and like the whole creative agencies that said, no, we need a photo shoot, we need to do it. I said, no, we can do different country backgrounds. You can do it from one studio now, right? So there things really change. But you can argue whether that's really creative or whether that is just giving us input so that we can think of the next level. And then maybe to give a couple of examples on how we use it or how I see it used with my clients. Mm-hmm. It is really to help amend, apart from, like, and now I focus on the knowledge part, not on all the other applications of AI, but like on how it helps amend innovation mostly. So on a pharma company that said, okay, we have knowledge all around, now if I use AI and it brings it already in a summarized, insightful way, then we can really talk about decisions, then we can really talk about the next level. Or a big semicon client that I serve, their biggest challenge is our industry goes really fast. We have to grow really, really, really rapid. And talent is actually retiring because they were there from the start. How do I keep that in-house? And that's beyond knowledge management, just having reports there. It is about people understanding truly what is done and how to tell the next story. And they are experimenting with AI on training their next generation, but also are very aware of the risk that you were mentioning, Liz, because that is codified information, it's difficult information. And I think similar for McKinsey, we build our own tools, but we're also trying to play like what can and cannot be done.
Thank you.
And maybe the last notion on it, and then I will stop also on numbers. If you just look at like how big is this opportunity, and we just look at Gen AI, and we looked at like 70 bigger use cases, the value, and you can estimate, it's like $2 to $4.4 trillion on a yearly basis. That is like Britain for a year, like the GDP, right? So it's not going to go away. So now it's about us to use it smartly and wisely, I think.
Thank you. Amy, I'd love to bring you in. What are your reactions as you listen to all of this?
Of course, there's the recency effect. And I just can't help thinking that ratio, and actually even that exponential ratio of the word opportunity to the word risk, may actually be appropriate. Right? Not because people are sort of, afraid and, just reluctant to embrace novelty and so forth, but because of the fact that we are not natural systems thinkers. And we're quite linear and quite immediate in our thinking. And so we're not good at anticipating, and this has been shown again and again and again, we're not good at anticipating the unexpected ways that a handful of factors come together. And what AI, a risk it brings is the sped up convening of factors, right? So it just might, and clearly opportunity, but it just might be the right ratio, right? So I'm thinking about our ability to feel accountable, to feel a sense of ownership, and to choose wisely in what has now become a far more fascinatingly complex world.
Yeah, and also a much faster world, right? Because what's different about this technological revolution is the pace at which everything's changing.
Yep. And the pace with which we can produce complex failures is quite high indeed.
Yeah. Alex, I wanted to come back to a point that you touched on briefly, which is about learning, right? Because as we think about all this disruption, one of the challenges I would imagine for a lot of leaders and organizations is how do we help our people build the skills and the mindsets in order, to think through all these questions, to decide on that accountability and ownership that's required. So how are you guys thinking about that?
Well, I'm going to use two examples that Gianpiero and Amy used. So the metaphor of la maison and the intelligent failure actually are really two good examples to bring together when we think about how technology and learning work, because in one respect, the metaphor of the home is exactly a perfect metaphor for the people that he articulated so well, that live in the building, live in the office, live in the work, right? But the other thing is, with all this new tech, it is a little bit of intelligent failure. Like we don't really know everything we're getting into, but yet we got to take that step. And I think this is a really good view to have. The other thing that I want to say here is it's really important and fundamental that we at least try to remember that technology, even the most advanced technologies that are coming out in our market, are really designed to enhance lives, not replace them. They're really designed to enhance the processes and the things we do, not completely replace the people that are doing them. Some jobs are being replaced for sure, and many more might be. But the purpose of technology and the data we have that goes back almost 60 years validates this. So if we look at the data and we look at the empirical evidence before us, we can't deny it. There's just too much information and too much data that consistently proves that every major innovation has created more jobs, not less. And so from our perspective, I think when we look at the topic of learning, it really is about two fundamental things: future-proofing skills, understanding how the skills inside of an organization need to continue to develop for the people that have the knowledge, have the expertise. We want to capture that. So how do we do that? One thing that we probably see in our work collectively is that many of the people in our organizations who know the business don't often get to tell us about the business. They're not sharing their knowledge. So we have to look for ways to extract the knowledge from the people that actually make the business work, not just across the leadership or the management, but there are many people inside our organizations that do the day-to-day heavy lifting, and we need to be able to get what's in their head out so we can capture it. We can repurpose it. We can actually use it for the next point I'm going to make, which is we have to have a relentless pursuit of data quality. So we want to talk about advanced technologies like AI, but we really need to understand how does it really work if the data is not very good, or if the data is not fully complete. And one of the ways we improve the data, and one of the ways that we can be more assured of the quality of the output that we want to receive when we introduce this into our organizations, is making sure the knowledge inside the minds of our people is extracted, is pulled down. Because that will make a difference for us. I don't know if anyone has done any experimenting with Gen AI tools just for fun. There's some great tools out there. Everything from creating songs out of your white papers to two-person podcasts with products like Notebook LM and others. But one of the things I did is I do random tests. You know, I ask different engines to give me data, and one of the most common things that I see across this is there usually is a variation of 20 to 30% of mistakes in the data. So that just reminds us that data quality is still a very real issue, and it's not just running into the technology itself, but being able to be mindful of how we as people inside our organizations have to improve the data if we in fact want to get the most out of the tech.
Absolutely, and that goes back to Pierre's point about accountability and responsibility, which I think goes even higher with all this new tech. Let me just ask for a quick show of hands. How many of you in your organizations would say you regularly, in your organizations, regularly use Gen AI? Just raise your hand.
Wow.
Okay, not everybody, but I would say the overwhelming majority. Okay, fantastic, thank you. Gianpiero, would love to get your reactions as you listen to this conversation.
Where do I begin? I was actually kind of taken by I genuinely believe the intent is to improve lives. And so if we make a comparison, in the field where I originally trained in medicine, I mean, people have an intent. Every practice, every molecule has to improve lives. But we couldn't make mass experiments on our children and accept that they have access to something that produces 20, 30% variance in their effect. It just, we would go to jail. And with technology, we're making those experiments and trying to. So I think we have to really, if we're really serious about thinking about accountability, then we have to think of questions like that. Because I think some of our comments then betray what I call, the provincialism of the techno-utopianist, which is that it's just because it's going to be good for us, then it's going to be good for everyone. And to be honest, in a panel, especially in a panel that's called Radical but Practical Ideas, we can't not introduce the word power. See, I think the reason why we are afraid of technology, or the reason because we are excited about technology, is because what we think might happen has actually already happened. And if you change the word technology with power, some of us have had experiences of power being used on us in ways that really restricted our ability to exist and live a full existence. And some of us have had experience of power that we have used in ways that has expanded our possibilities. And if you translate, and if every time you use technology, you substitute the word technology with the word power, I think you have an interesting thing. For example, can we really call it a revolution if it concentrates power in the hands of a smaller group of people? Because that was the brilliance of Peter Drucker's idea of knowledge work. Essentially, as you said, Mary, right? Automation was taking away a lot of power. And he said, but look, there is this thing you can do, even if you don't own the means of production, which is knowledge work. If you can learn to control computers, then you can create a lot of value in the economy by helping the people who own the means of production. And so he created a refuge. It's called, in another field, it's called the middle class. And now we're going towards an economy in which we are back to the people who own the means of production, capturing and creating, also creating and capturing most of the value. And I think this is problematic, not just for the truck driver that is going to lose his job in 5 years, and for the last 5 years in which he has the job, he has to live with the camera looking at him. I mean, leave him in peace at least for those few years before the self-driving truck comes in, No, not even that. And I can understand why it would be good for the trucking company and all of that. I don't mean to be facetious about these things that are very serious. And the last thing I want to say is we talk about humanity as if it's something we have. Like, we have humanity and we just have to figure out what it is and then we can deploy it and we're fine. But look around, humanity is an accomplishment. We find it and lose it every day. Some days we are much less human than others. And one thing that makes us become better humans is actually friction. Yeah, it's friction. In any field you can think, romance, work, politics, a better human is one that is able to manage friction safely, productively. That's how you have a good date, that's how you have a good office, that's how you have a good democracy. And so every time we delegate our ability to discern and manage friction, we become less skilled at managing those things. that we live in. That's kind of my point. And I think it does come, it does really have a point of accountability, which is, a problematic thing.
Sounds like you need a camera installed in your car.
Or maybe not.
So thank you, Gianpiero, for some really profound questions, which I'm sure we will continue to explore over the course of the next 2 days. I'm really sorry to have to interrupt this conversation, but I do want to touch on the 2 other themes that I think are also really important. So Amy, you teed off the work that you've done on the right kind of wrong and how our organizations can, in a different way, explore failure and the right kinds of failure. And I wanted to get a few other ideas, thoughts, perspectives from our senior executives about what you're seeing and what's working and what's not. And Liz, maybe I'll start with you, because when we spoke earlier, you described Palo Alto Networks as moving from a know-it-all culture, or not having a know-it-all culture, but having a learn-it-all culture, which I thought was a wonderful way of describing it. And I'd love to hear you talk about what are you doing to really embrace curiosity and create learning and the right kind of failure.
Yeah, I mean, we are, as you can imagine, in a power company, not a tech company. We are, we move really, really quickly. Yesterday will not be the same as tomorrow. We have a value set that is disruption, collaboration, execution. So we treat every market like we're entering it as a startup. So it does become increasingly challenging to adapt your workforce to that sort of behavior. So when we go back to the learn it all, it's giving everybody the opportunity to learn whatever they want, to explore their curiosity, because we reward and we recognize disruption, curiosity. So in terms of how we develop, and I think the human element of development can't be underestimated, right? I do believe that, and actually last year I met with all of our sales managers, all 80 of them, for 45 minutes, face to face. And one of the questions we asked them was, how do you learn? And for the majority, they said, well, I attend the seminars, I attend the WebExes, or I go to the training. But all of them said, I learn from my colleagues. And that's super, super important. So we like to have learning moments within the organization where people can learn for others. But also we open up all of our development. Doesn't matter what level you are or where you sit in the organization, you can attend online largely any of our training and development. So, fostering that curiosity, it could be about management, it could be about AI. I mean, one of the things that we've done around AI is ensure that our workforce has AI literacy. So lunch and learns, every time we open an office, we do AI training. I think we're all a little bit over AI'd, but for sure. But, it's important that people have a curiosity to learn.
Fantastic, thank you. Liesje, how about McKinsey? What are you guys doing?
On the learning side.
Yeah,
so
and also embracing failure.
Exactly, because I was quite inspired with all you said, Amy. So embracing failure, what I find, and I do it with what we do at McKinsey, but also what we do at organizations that I work with. And then we like to talk about fail fast, like embrace failure, test, like throw it out there, like indeed psychological safety is there, go do. But
it's easy to say, but
it's very
much harder to do in
but
practice.
What I do find is like, where does it work and where it's like sort of tolerated? It's where we do product development, or we have a garage where we do new ideas on Friday afternoon, or we do lunch and learn, and then we get items in. So where it's a little bit of a cube is made, and there you can go and fail. You do a scrum session because that is meant to fail. So then there's a big tolerance of failure, and we look at each other and say, look, we are a startup, or we are a scale-up, or we're pretending to be. Now, then there is the flip side, and I also see that often, and that is what I would say intolerance for incompetence or perceived incompetence, which might actually not be incompetence, it might be the failure side, but it's not happening in the garage, it's happening day to day. You say something that is perceived by someone else, that's not smart, that's stupid, you didn't think it through, right? So there is this thin line, and then if you think about, okay, what cultures actually do allow for it, those where this is called out, right? Where there is a role modeling, where indeed leaders also mention it. So this role modeling portion is important. And maybe to link it a bit to like one quote of Peter Drucker, where it's said like, behind any successful business, there has been a courageous decision. And then if you think of it, there have been probably also many non-successful business that also had a courageous decision that just didn't work out, right? So thinking about that decision part, I think, is quite key also in how we look at it within McKinsey and in other companies, because when do you actually take that decision? When do you take that leap of faith? And what is needed? And maybe to put in one more piece of research, and then I will make sure that others also have some time to speak on this, but we did look at 140 teams globally, all kinds of organizations, including McKinsey, but also many others, on drivers of success of these teams and linking it to performance of what they actually do. And there's all research on team effectiveness, and we can fill a day of it, we will not do it. So, of course, trust came up and communication. But actually what I found very interesting, decision-making, especially bold decision-making and innovative thinking were the most important drivers that set apart the top quartile, and with 75% better than the bottom quartile of these teams. So they do better when they, at some point, decide, right? And really go for it and allow for others to decide, right? So there is a lot to do on being open to experiment, but also really talk about, okay, what are the bold decisions that we're going to stand behind, no matter what, and we're going to follow through. And if we find out that they were not that smart, okay, then we're going to change course. And that I've seen help well, and I think that is, if you want to do something, like focus on that decision-making practice.
Thank you. Now, again, in the interest of time, I'm going to move us to the third theme, because I do want to touch on the second topic, Amy, that you raised around, how do we think about this return to office? And one of the things that's amazing about this group is that we have very different approaches and perspectives. And so, Pierre, if you don't mind, I'll start with you, because I'd love to hear about what you've done at PMI, because you don't have an office, you're fully remote, and I'd love to hear how you thought about it and some of the opportunities, but maybe also challenges that come with it.
You frustrated me a little bit because I actually wanted to talk about the wrong ways of failing, but we'll do this another way.
Coffee.
Coffee, exactly. Yeah, just by way of context, maybe to explain our specific situation at PMI, basically we nurture a global community of people who manage projects. It's about 40 million people in the world whose main activity is to manage projects or products. So that's about 4% of the global knowledge workforce. It's about 1 billion people, right? And we are very much the home of these 40 million people. We provide to them professional certifications, professional education, professional platforms, like software platforms to help them do their jobs. We provide events so that they can network, get some thought leadership. We provide volunteering opportunities for them to develop while giving back and doing something meaningful, purposeful. So we are a very large organization in terms of reach, but fairly small in how many people we are. So we are about 800 full-time employees. We don't raise money, so our funding comes from our products and services that we sell. We do about $400 million in revenue. And we also rely a lot on the volunteering, on the experts, the project professionals who help us come with content, help us define what the future of our profession should be. Now, we were founded in Philadelphia. So until 2020, we had mostly one office in Philadelphia and about 80%, 85% of our workforce based around Philadelphia. And COVID happened, so everybody was home, and suddenly we started to lifting that constraint of having to recruit people around our office. We started to have access to a much broader pool of talent. And if you think of us doing about 1/3 of our activity in the US, 1/3 in China, 1/3 in the rest of the world, covering all industries across 200 countries, this idea of having 85% of our workforce based around Philadelphia was a massive limitation. So after COVID, we did not come back to the office. We decided that for us, the best way to engage with our teams locally, with project professionals everywhere, was to have a distributed workforce. And we frankly got much better talent doing that. It's not against Philadelphia, but definitely if you recruit people from the whole world, you have more chances to find the kind of people you want and need. Now, beyond PMI, because I think it's important to also not only focus on the differences, because learning is not about the differences, it's about what you can reapply, right? The commonalities. So beyond PMI, I personally believe that the future is not in mostly empty fixed offices. I don't think that, and for a very simple reason. We have this other problem than AI, right? We have the problem of the world's sustainability. If half of the knowledge workers were not going to offices that are mostly empty, and we would save all the maintenance of these offices, and we save all the commute, that would be the equivalent of 1.5 times of the carbon emissions of the entire airline industry. So that's pretty significant. And I personally do not believe that it makes a lot of sense to force people anyway to live close to fixed offices in terms of the diversity of talent that we need to innovate. Because we need to innovate if we want to save the planet, right? So both from a reducing waste standpoint and from an innovation standpoint, where we need distributed teams, the best possible experts, wherever they sit, and whichever company they work for, because let's not forget that most of our teams that innovate do not only work with people from their own companies, they also work with people from other companies, suppliers, partners, academia, you name it. So with this in mind, I believe that the future is not about forcing people back into fixed offices. Doesn't mean no personal contact. Conferences like this, or multiple other opportunities, you have to bring your teams together, but more intentionally, less frequently, but more intentionally, with more meaningfulness, is what I think we should learn. And it's hard. We have many issues with working from home all the time, and I'm not going to spend time now explaining all of them, but we have many issues coming with this. But I believe that, as anything else, it can be learned how you do it the best possible way. And the companies that will learn how to do that, in my opinion, will gain a significant competitive advantage, certainly in terms of talent acquisition and retention, but also in terms of diversity of the people they will have on their teams.
Thank you. I think it's a fascinating example. So you're fully remote. You don't actually have an office.
We have one in Beijing, but
basically almost fully remote.
China is different.
Thank you. Let me ask Liz, because I think you're on the other end of the spectrum in terms of encouraging people to really come back to the office. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Palo Alto Networks.
Yeah, I don't know how many HR practitioners there are in here, but you'll know this has been a topic that we've been talking about for, it feels like forever. It consumes all of our, I mean, now at least it's probably 20% of my job is working out what's fair and what's equitable around either return to office or hybrid working. So about 18 months ago, we looked at our workforce and we were worried about the development and the coaching of our teams. We were worried about the creativity and the innovation. So what we did is we said to our workforce, please come back to the office. We'd really like to see you in the office. We feel our early in career talent is not getting the development they need. So managers, please come back to the office 3 days a week. Because one of the things I noticed going into the office was the people that were in there were the early in career talent, because that's where they build their relationships. It's now their social life. To your point, this is where we live. It's super important. So interestingly, 70% of the people we asked to come back to the office came back to the office willingly, and we retained that level to the point where actually we've opened 2 new flagship offices, one in London and one in Amsterdam. And we've thought very creatively about how we create collaborative, sustainable offices for our employees. But it is tricky, right? It's what jobs need to come back to the office. All of our R&D staff we want in the office, because we believe that innovation, that creativity, and being together is really important. We want our sales teams out on the road. We want them with customers. We're a customer-first environment. And I've noticed that they come into the office more than they should, and we end up with the office absolutely full. Which is because we haven't budgeted for the fact that everybody does want to come back in. But there is definitely, there is also those employees that, hey, I did this during COVID, I was successful, I want to carry on working from home, and if I come into the office now, the extra cost of my dog, clothes, transport, how are you going to compensate me for this? So the balance is getting a creative space and making employees feel that they live and that they work within our environment at the same time as being fair and equitable across all of our employees. So it's a super, super tough one, but our general belief is we want people to learn from people in collaborative network environments, and we want them to regain that muscle memory because the human interaction is super important. I mean, you're all here today. And probably one of the things you'll say when you take away is the value of the network and meeting people face to face. And that's the human relationship, isn't it?
Thank you. I love the fact that we've got very different perspectives and
No, I totally agree with the face-to-face side. I'm just saying the right way
There are
to do
different
that
ways
may
of
not
doing
be
it.
having fixed offices that
Absolutely.
are empty most of the time. That's
Well,
So-
we have the opposite problem in that we're full and we're like, do we build another office? You know?
So I want to bring in both Gianpiero and Alex. So Gianpiero, you've written an article that was titled In Praise of the Office. So I'd like to get your perspectives. And then Alex, your practical examples of what you're saying. So maybe Gianpiero?
Love letter to the office. And I think the office, yes, as a physical place, and I think the office can be a platform. The principles still apply. I do think face-to-face contact is important. I think we have to always think about who do we think, why do we think some people need to be more creative or not? I mean, one of the things I've been thinking recently is I actually love the flexibility not to have to go to the office every day. It really helps me with other things I want to do with my life. It helps me concentrate on some of my work. But there is a loss, and the loss doesn't accrue to me because I'm senior, I've been socialized. The loss accrues to some people who don't have as much of me. And in my profession, it's really important for junior people to spend time with senior people and some time to share an idea, and that is, now they have to make an appointment on Zoom and we have half an hour and, it's loaded. Much more than, you're sitting next at the lunch table and that kind of stuff. So I don't think, again, I lose as much, but I do think that there are people that maybe lose less. But I want to share one little piece of advice. Many of you will have these empty office spaces. There's a lot of young, relatively starving artists that need a place to work. Invite them and let them hang out there. And I actually think people that work in your office will get a lot of good inspirations and ideas from having them there, if not a lot of more beauty around. And they might learn something about business that they need in order to be able to make their living as painters or as...
It could be a win-win.
Radical.
So it could be a win-win.
Radical and practical.
And then, call it CSR if you have to, and that's, and score points that way. I think it would be a brilliant, a Druckerian idea.
I think that's the point, though, isn't it? If you're doing sort of constant Zoom calls, which we all are, the nuance of the relationship is lost.
But Zoom, Zoom is like
so you prefer people doing their Zoom calls from the office?
Oh, that happens.
That's
for sure.
silly.
That's it.
Yeah.
No, but the constant, the whole thing about digital is the constant presence of each other's absence. We are alive and dead to each other at the same time. That is presence without touch is of course, what the whole literature on desire is based on, but also the literature on fear.
And those minute interactions, that's the grease. That's the grease of a workplace.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Alex, let me bring you in, and then Amy, it sounds like you've got a reaction, so please.
Sorry, we take a completely different view of this.
Go for it.
The question for us isn't come or don't come to the office. It's what problem are we trying to solve? So for 15 years, we've been working remote anyway. We've had people delivering our services remotely and on site with clients and being in the office. And yes, they come to the office and they sit in phone booths and do Teams calls. So I definitely agree with your point there. But our view is the same point that we're actually teaching our clients. We talk a lot about this topic called transformation fatigue. People are tired of both the buzzword and the process. And one thing that we try to teach our own selves in our own organization is more about this thing we call the metamorphosis effect, right? Everyone loves butterflies, and everyone intelligent gets the process. We understand what happens when it's a caterpillar and what happens when it's a butterfly. But we don't really account for that soupy process in between that happens for it to become a butterfly. And this is one of the problems of why you have fatigue both in organizations who are trying to run big programs or organizations that are trying to deal with this whole RTO topic and how to get their people to improve and how do you affect the culture and so forth. So we ask this question, right? How do we solve the problem? And part of solving the problem is planning for the soupy process. You know, being able to understand the impact that happens from the moment that you send people to a remote location or tell them not to come in, or from the moment that you do. However you design your organization, if you're looking at an outcome you want to get to, if you want to get to a butterfly, then you need to account for what that process is like. And that planning and that expectation setting, I think, is the better question than whether you should come to the office or not. Because everyone made valid points, and I can't disagree with any of them. They all have validity, but I think this is part of what's polarizing about the topic is everyone has a good view, but it really is context specific to your organization and your people.
Thank you. Amy?
And your mission, absolutely. So just in the 20 seconds we have left, you know, empirically we know that with more distance, our relationships narrow. We do connect with people who are like us, who are in our same function, at our same level. We are far less likely, and in some ways able, to connect with people cross-level, cross-discipline, and cross-department. And so, does that matter? Sometimes, sometimes not, right? So then I go back to Alex's point. And also, just emotionally, experientially, we know that the quality of connection is better in person. I think we all agree on that for ideation, for difficult conversations, for problem-solving, meaningful discussions. That synchronous and preferably in person works better. Neither of those data points suggests that all work should be in person, right? But they do suggest that we should be engaging in a design process to put together the right configurations for the missions that we are trying to accomplish. And they will not be the same for everyone.
Yeah, thank you. So sadly, we are out of time. But before we wrap up, I just want to quickly ask you, briefly, what's one final piece of advice that you would offer to our audience with us? So I'll start with you, Liesje.
Yes, the radical idea, for me, it's not that radical because it's more, think about the community that you're in and the belonging that the sense of belonging that you can actually achieve there. And what does that mean in your innovation, in your interactions, when you're in the office, how you use AI? Like, we are humans, right? So interact as if we are and remain.
We need to feel that we matter, and we need to lean into curiosity.
Thank you.
If we speak of something very practical and radical, we know that our teams are using Gen AI way more than what is theoretically authorized. So I would declare a complete amnesty on AI usage so that people come clean without fear, so we can discuss with them how they use it, why they use it, and then help them do it maybe in a safer way.
Thank you. Liz?
I would say technology to solve problems, but it's vitally important to lean in on the human relationships and the empathy and the development of the human interaction at work.
Thank you.
2 points. I would leave you with that people and technology are collaborators, not competitors. And I would also leave you with the point of be deliberate about defining your terms in your organization.
Nothing radical is practical in the short term. So my advice would be, if you're here at Drucker, it's because you're likely to have a humanistic aspiration for your work, for your business. Then don't treat the forum like a hardware store, thinking about what can I get a tool that I can use on Monday morning. I know we always say that. Treat it like a theater. If you think of a good piece of art, what it does is it touches you and bothers you for a long time. And then eventually you figure out ways in which you can bring it into your life and into your work. And so, yeah, this is not a hardware store.
Thank you.
Gallery.
So hopefully this has given you a bit of inspiration for action. I think Eduardo is just going to tee up the next sessions. You'll have a coffee break and a chance to connect in just a minute. But I wanted to just say a huge thank you for a really fascinating discussion covering a broad range of topics. And I hope that over the next 2 days, you'll have a chance to go deeper and to really come away with both inspiration and pieces of action that you take back. So thank you to all of our panelists.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.